Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yay. I think the same thing's going to happen again when I do the recording later. There's probably going to be a little delay. I don't know why it's doing that, but that is what it's doing. But I hope you guys are all doing good, or doing well rather. Let's get started because we got quite a bit to cover, but it shouldn't be as mind-numbing as the last class. I know, like stems growth in general, with all the different cell types and like the primary growth, secondary growth, all that stuff, it can get a little mind-numbing. I'm not gonna lie. So I'm hoping today is a little less that way. And it probably will feel better anyways, just because today we're going to talk about leaves and roots. So there'll be some mind-numbing stuff, but some of it will be a little bit more familiar, I think. Cool. Yeah, so I'll go ahead and get started. As always, if you have questions, you can feel free to write in the chat box, or if you want to talk, that's fine too. Alrighty, so hopefully you can see this slide. All right, so last time we did this very exciting thing called growth, right? Talked about meristems and tissues, and dicot stems versus monocot stems, some variations that allow different adaptations. Today we're going to talk about the leaf and the root, functions of the leaf, functions of the root. Okay, well, I'm going to leave that on the side for right now. But yeah, functions on the leaf, functions of the root, leaf and root form, what they look like on the outside, what they look like on the inside, dicot versus monocot leaf, and then different types of root systems, and then variation and adaptation of the leaf and the root. Before I get started, I see in the chat box talking about quizzes. Any questions you have about, okay, yeah, so I see a question in the chat box that's a direct message to me. I would appreciate you sending this to me in an email so that I can follow up with you one-on-one. Okay, so let's go ahead. Right, so leaves. So you guys probably are familiar with a leaf, right? You've seen leaves before, hopefully. Particularly in fall might be the time that you notice leaves the most, right? You know, for all you Instagrammers, right? You were like taking pictures of pretty leaves and posting it, right? So yeah, so leaves. So first I should mention that there's not really like a shape that is a leaf. There's like so many different types of shapes that leaves can have depending on the species. Right, so this slide just gives you an example of some of them, right? This is only, remember, there's almost 400,000 species of plant. So you can imagine there's quite a lot of variation in leaf. This is just a little bit, right? Here's a little bit more. So each of the things I'm showing you here are leaves. Can you always identify if the plant is a dicot or monocot by the leaf? Yes, yes, Morgan, you can. And we will get into that in a little bit to talk about the different ways to tell them apart. But first, I want to draw your attention to something like this. Like this here, that's one leaf. This here, that's one leaf. And believe it or not, this here is also one leaf. You might notice some of them, right, look a little bit more complicated than others, right? Even here, this is one leaf. And so we'll learn about how to identify or how to discuss those two things. Is it because it comes from one stem? Kind of. What it really will be is that there will be a bud, an axillary bud at the base of each of these stems, and that's how you know that that's a single leaf. But we will get into that. Yep, really quickly, I think. So just so you know, look again, these are all one leaf, right? Even though some of them look very complicated, right? These are all just one leaf. Okay, so look, wow, look at all this variation. in leaf shape. And this is only ferns. This slide alone only shows you leaves from ferns. So you can imagine just a few examples, right? So much diversity in leaf shape and form. In addition to a lot of different shapes, leaves come in a lot of different sizes as well, depending on the species. So this is an example of a very, very small leaf. This comes from an aquatic plant that's in the family Lemnaceae. I think there's an extra A in there, but don't worry about that. The common name is the duckweeds. And so you can see, look at this picture of a bee. This bee, so this is an aquatic plant that floats in water. And I'll draw, I guess I'll use yellow. So look, this bee is standing on a mat of these duckweed leaves. And look how tiny, teeny tiny they are, right? They're itty bitty, teeny tiny leaves. Down here on the bottom, you see a hand that has oops, my awesome annotating back at work. Each of these is holding a duckweed plant from a different members from the duckweed family, Lemnaceae. And you can see how very teeny, teeny, tiny these plants are. So like right here, this plant has probably, I don't know, 10 leaves on it, super small. So leaves can come in a lot of different shapes. Leaves can come in a lot of different sizes, like these small leaves and really, really enormous leaves, like this one. Look how big. This is one leaf surrounding this head, right? Very big. Look, this is a type of water lily, so big that a child could even stand on it. All right, leaves come in a lot of different shapes. Leaves come in a lot of different sizes. And no matter what the shape, no matter what the size, leaves all serve some very important functions for plants. Probably the most important function is photosynthesis. So I talked very briefly about photosynthesis in the first class, in that it's a process that plants use to convert sunlight, right, and carbon dioxide and water into oxygen and sugars, right here on the right side. So that's a very important process, and that is going to happen in the leaf. This was a more simple drawing. Here is a little bit more advanced, kind of explain to you. Oh, sorry, no, this is photosynthesis. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Photosynthesis is one process that leaves do, taking sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and turning it into sugars and oxygen. Another function that leaves do is something called transpiration. Transpiration is the process by which water moves through the plant and then it gets released as water vapor from the leaves. So we covered, we talked about it briefly before when we went over the plant body. We have the shoot system and the root system, and I told you the root system is usually where water and minerals is absorbed. So look, in this drawing, here's our root system, here's our shoot system. Water is going to go into the root system and then move up through the vascular system, right? Does anyone remember what tissue the water is going to move from the roots to the leaves? Covered a few different complex tissues last time.
Is it xylem?
Yes, yes, great job. Yes, so the xylem, right? So the water is going to enter the roots, move through the plant via the xylem tissue, which is part of the vascular tissue. And eventually the water is going to make it to, let's go to this one, to a leaf. And in that leaf, the leaf is going to use that water to do photosynthesis, but it might not use all the water to do photosynthesis. There might be other water, and that water will actually get released through these holes, which we'll learn about today, the bottom of the leaf, as water vapor. So you might remember from the very first class, I said that plants provide a service of cooling effects. This is part of the reason why. So yes, plants provide shade, which makes us more cool on a sunny day. But plants are also releasing water vapor, so that can also feel cooling to you. We'll talk about this a little bit more in detail. But when the water vapor is released from these holes in the leaf, that's the process we call transpiration. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about it. Well, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. Okay, so sorry, I got excited. So this is something you could even try at home if you don't believe me that plants are releasing water vapor. So as I said before, like, water is going into the roots. I guess black is not a good choice right here. Let's use pink. Water is going in through the roots, up through the stem, and eventually leaving the holes of the leaf via transpiration, right? But if you were to put a plastic bag around a leaf on your plant, over time, you'll notice that the bag will look foggy. And you can even try this at home. If you have kids, I would suggest even trying it with them so you can show them. But that will be able to demonstrate to you quickly that transpiration is occurring. Okay, so leaves come in a bunch of different shapes. Leaves come in a bunch of different sizes, right? Leaves serve functions for the plant, photosynthesis and transpiration. Now let's talk a little bit about structures of leaves that you can see on the outside, like with your naked eye, rather. So we saw this slide last time. This is the representative cartoon plant with a shoot system and root system. And so leaves are part of that shoot system, right? The shoot system consists of stems, leaves, and flowers. So leaves are part of that. See? And back when I was showing you the different pictures of the different leaves, somebody asked about the stem, saying, or is it because they're on the same stem? So the stem of a leaf has a specific name, which is petiole. So I will use blue. Petiole. So if you're holding, I always say this, if you're playing with a leaf, because I know everybody probably plays with leaves all the time, right? But if you're playing with a leaf and you're holding it by the stem of that leaf, that stem is called a petiole. So in this drawing here, this here is a petiole, right? Right here is another petiole. And then the other part of the leaf, not the stem, the other part, usually the flat green part, is called a blade or a lamina. Both are acceptable. You can choose whichever one you like better. On a homework quiz or an exam, I'll put blade / lamina. Okay, so you'll have your choice. And so for this cartoon leaf, this is a blade or a lamina. This is a blade or a lamina on another leaf. And remember when I was asked if about that, if it's because they have one stem. Well, now we know that stem is called a petiole, but what I was trying to say before is that we would know, for example, like, let's say that this leaf here, let me draw it. I'll draw it in black so it stands out a little bit better on this slide. So let's say this leaf was a little bit more complicated, right? Like had a lot of little bits of it, pieces to it, kind of like those more complicated leaves on the previous slide. We would know that this is one leaf as versus like 10 leaves because there's this little thing right here next to the petiole, basically where the petiole attaches to the stem. There's a little bud in there, and that bud will always occur at the where the petiole touches the stem. And some of you very observant students will say to me, well, like, how come there's one not right there? Because it's a cartoon. And so they're just trying to draw things to make it for visualization. All right, see? So the buds and the axils of those leaves are how we know that that is a leaf. But in addition to that, eventually, this is where branching will occur. So last time, right? Last time we talked a lot about, what color? I guess red. Last time we talked a lot about apical bud, right? Here's an apical bud at the tip. Here's an apical bud at another tip. But apical buds are not the only buds on a plant. There's also something called axillary buds. The reason they're called axillary, and it's not auxiliary, no, axillary. The reason it's called an axillary bud is because, look, here is a stem, here's roots, right? Here is a leaf, whoa, right? And I'll use the same color as I did before. Here is an axillary bud. Why do we call it that? Because the space between the stem, this little space here, is called an axil. That's what the name of that space is called. And so hence the little bud occurs in that space and we call it an axillary bud, not auxiliary, axillary. But that's actually going to be where branches form. So eventually this bud will grow and become a stem. So you see that, actually I take it back. Ha, ha, ha. Remember I said, see, oh, I blamed the cartoon, but I should have looked better. Look, remember when I said before, some of you observant students might say, well, where's the axillary bud on that one? It's gone. You know why? Because it already grew into a branch. Look, right? It already grew into a branch now with an apical bud. That's why there's no axillary bud there. See? Ah, aha, missed it. I should have looked closer. All right. So a lot of leaf shapes. And so we'll start with these more simple shape that you're probably used to. So there's parts of a simple leaf. We've covered some of them just now. I'll stick with blue. You got the petiole, right, which is the stem thing right there. You got the blade, which is the flat green part. Then you have veins. So remember, vascular tissue, which is xylem and phloem tissue, is found in the roots, it's found in the stems, and it's found in the leaves. In the leaves, the vascular tissue, we call it veins, the veins of a leaf. So here is, maybe blue is not so hot on that. We'll go back to black. So right here is, in this leaf, you have a central vein that we call the midrib. And inside of that vein, there's going to be vascular tissue, xylem and phloem, right? That would have come from vascular tissue in the stem. Look, oh, xylem and phloem, then xylem and phloem goes in here, and then xylem and phloem enters the leaf, right? So the central vein is called a midrib. And then in certain species, we'll talk about them later with the different types of venation, but you'll have other veins coming off, right? These are just all veins consisting of xylem and phloem. And sometimes there'll be like little tiny veins going from larger veins, okay? So those are parts of a simple leaf. However, sometimes you have compound leaf. And a compound leaf, if you weren't taught differently, you might look at parts of a compound leaf and think that they're a bunch of little leaves. So for example, over here, right? This whole thing is one leaf. This is a leaf of a fern. And so all these other smaller components are basically leaflets, although we have a better word to describe them in the ferns. But just want to make it clear that this whole big thing is one leaf. Look, one leaf, one leaf. Example of a compound leaf. I think we have it on the next slide, but no, I guess not. One thing I should point out that's a little different on the simple leaf, the central vein was called a midrib, right? But on a compound leaf, we don't call it a midrib anymore because it's kind of complicated. So instead, on a compound leaf, we call the midrib a rachis. Rachis. It's like R-A-Y-K-I-S-S is how it sounds, rachis. So there's no longer, so like on this over here, on this leaf, this central vein, we don't call it a midrib anymore. We would call that a rachis because we're dealing with a compound leaf. Rachis. Okay. We'll learn more about rachis when we get to the ferns. All right, so parts of a simple leaf, covered it. Parts of a compound leaf, covered it. There's some other things you might see with your naked eye or under the microscope. So trichomes are hairs that are on leaves. Trichomes can serve a lot of different purposes depending on the trichome. There's a lot of different shapes of trichomes. There's a lot of different sizes. Some of them secrete oils or even stingy chemicals. So like if you touch some plants with certain trichomes, it actually like sting you, like a jellyfish. Other ones are shaped, other ones serve effectively to prevent insects from eating the leaf. So like if you were an insect and this hair was covering a leaf, or even if you were like a bunny rabbit and this hair was covering the leaf, you probably wouldn't want to eat that leaf so much, right? Like think about you, when you go buy lettuce at the grocery store, right? Or spinach or arugula or whatever, bok choy, whatever vegetable leaf you're buying, none of them really have hair. None of them are really fuzzy, right? That's because in general we've evolved to not really want to eat leaves that are fuzzy for different. So it helps protect the leaf from being eaten. This is a pretty common houseplant that's sold. The purple color you see is from purple hairs. And if you were to touch that plant, it would like feel kind of like velvet. Likewise, if you've ever bought an air plant at the store, it will come with a lot of fuzz on it. And I'll just tell this story really quickly. Back in the day, I worked at a plant store in Brooklyn, and a woman came in and she bought a bunch of plants, including some air plants. And when she came back about a week later, and I was like, how are the plants going? And she's like, not good. And I said, well, tell me what's going on. She's like, well, first of all, I noticed you guys need to clean more because when I brought the plants home, they were covered in dust. So the first thing I did was I dusted them. And I was horrified because and she's like, yeah. And then after that, they basically didn't do very well. And I said, well, that's because you removed the trichomes off of the plant. And those trichomes were protecting that air plant. And so, yeah, that's why that happened. Anyways, so if you buy an air plant, please don't dust it, I guess is the short story. And then these pictures here, believe it or not, I took those pictures during my graduate work. This is my study species, Capsella bursipistoris, which interestingly has two shapes of trichomes, some of which look like stars and some of which look like horns. So that was pretty cool to see under the microscope. All righty. Leaf division. So we already talked about simple leaves versus compound leaves. So compound leaves can vary in their level of complexity, and depending on how they vary, we call them different ways. So that's what this part is going to show you. All right, so simple leaf versus compound leaf. So on this slide here, we have one simple leaf and we have 3 compound leaves, right? This is the simple leaf. I always say if you are trying to determine whether something's a simple leaf or a compound leaf, if you were playing with the leaf and holding the stem, if there's only one thing on top of that stem, you're dealing with a simple leaf. So look, for example, here, there's only one thing on top of the stem. That's how you know you're dealing with a simple leaf. Whereas here, there's 3 things on top of the stem. Here, there's what? 9 or 12 things on top of this stem. And then here, who knows? Wow, lots more things on top of that stem, right? 30 things. So how do we call these different compound leaves, right? The simple leaf, I just said, has only one part above the stem or the petiole. But with the compound leaves, which I said have more than one part above the petiole, these we can call different things because they are shaped different ways. So for example, this one we call palmately compound leaf. Palmately compound leaf. Palm because it's shaped like a hand. Now you might say to me, this clover looking thing does not look like a hand. I get it. But the idea of a palmately compound is that much like our hands, the leaves, the leaflets are coming out of one central location. So if my palm was one central location, then these fingers are all coming out of that palm, right? And so likewise, here is the petiole, here is the one central location, and then you have a leaflet here, you got a leaflet here, you got a leaflet here. That's why it's called palmately shaped, right? If we add 2 more fingers, then there you go. Right. All right, palmately shaped. Or palmately compound, I should say. Palmately compound leaf. And then these we call pinnately compound because they look like feathers. So pinna comes from the Latin for feather. And I agree. I think that this here definitely looks kind of like a feather, right? Kind of like a feather. This one over here, maybe not so much, but definitely more feathery than the palmately compound leaf. And notice, right? Notice with the palmately compound leaf, they're all coming out of a central location, whereas in the pinnately compound leaves, they're all coming off the rachis, right? So here's that rachis again. Oops. I need a stylus or something. Here's the rachis. Here's the rachis. And notice that all of the leaflets are coming off of that rachis, not a central location, right? All right. If you have this kind of vibe, we can say this is 1 times pinnately compound. 1 times pinnately compound because there's only one division, right? So you have the leaflet and there's one thing, right? Only one thing, one leaflet at a time. We call that 1 times pinnately compound. Whereas on this one, we call this 2 times pinnately compound because there's 2 levels of division. So look, the first one is circled for you here, but I'll do it on another one. So here's the first division. And then on that one, there's many other little divisions, right? So like here is one, right? Here's another little division. So that's 2 levels, whereas on the previous, right, only 1 level here, right? One thing, done. I can't divide that anymore. It's just that one little thing. Whereas here, 2 times pinnately compound, 2 levels of things, 1 and then another, all these little guys. When this occurs, we have these fancier words, pinna and pinnule, because remember, you're dealing with pinnately compound leaves. So when you have 2 times pinnately compound, the bigger division is a pinna, and the smallest division is always a pinnule. Likewise, you can call these pinna as well. Oh yeah, it says it. Hello. You can call those pinna as well. But you could also call them leaflets. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting because it's on one stem. Yep, exactly. All right. sometimes, and don't get hung up on this, but sometimes you don't just have 1 times and 2 times pinnately compound. Plants, there's almost 400,000 species of plants. You can have as many times pinnately compound as you can imagine, right? Sometimes you see something like this, right? This is 1 leaf. This here. You can't see the whole thing, but this is 1 leaf, right? And on this one, whoa, there's 3 times pinnately compound. You got 1 thing, and then inside of that 1 thing, you have another thing. And then that thing itself is divided into these little things, right? 3 times pinnately compound. In that case, the largest thing is still called a pinna. The smallest thing is still called a pinnule. And anything in between is called a subpinna. Would a pothos plant fall into this category? A pothos plant has simple leaves. All right. So, and it even gets more crazy than that. There's some things that are like 10 times pinnately compound. I'm not even, this is basic plant science, so we'll just leave it with 3. All right. Here are some leaves. Here are some leaves. If I were to ask you, what is a leaf shape? What would you say? Some of these may be harder to see than others. This might be a good one to look at because it's the most clear, but all of these leaves have the same leaf shape. So first thing you have to ask yourself is this a simple leaf or a compound leaf? And that should be pretty straightforward. Simple leaf or compound leaf that I circled. If you hold the stem, is there 1 thing above the petiole or is there many things above the petiole? Everyone's asleep.
Many.
Thank you, Shonda. Many things, right? Right. Okay, I got it in the chat box here. Compound, correct. So, is this palmately compound? Or is this pinnately compound? Do the leaflets come out of a central location or all along
The second one. What was that? Not the pinnata.
Not palmately, pinnately, right?
Yes.
Pinnately. Great. Okay, so we know it's compound. We know it's pinnately compound, not palmately compound. And how many times is this one palmately compound? Is this 10 times pinnately compound? For that part, you got to look. Yep, good. You got to look at what's going on at this level, right? Yes. So as Mara's saying, 1 times pinnately compound, and that's correct, right? Because there's no other little divisions inside of that little thing. Good job, guys. All right, 1 times pinnately compound. All of those are on this slide. So here's a real leaf, not a drawing. Here's a real leaf showing you exactly that so that it's a little easier to see than in these, right? That's the real leaf right there. All righty. Yep. What I just said. All right, here's another one. Oh no, it says the answer. Don't look. No, too late. Yes. Unfortunately, this one says the answer, but look, so here's 1 leaf, right? Here is the rachis of that leaf. And then here is 1 division here, but it may be hard to see, but each of these is further divided into many little things. So this would be an example of a 2 times pinnately compound leaf. All right. So far we've covered that leaves can be very different in shape and different in size, that they do functions, photosynthesis and transpiration, and that there are ways to describe the leaves from the outside. For example, if it's a simple leaf or a compound leaf, if it's a compound leaf, how is it compound? And things like trichomes. So now we'll talk a little bit about something called leaf arrangement. So leaf arrangement is the more fancy word for that is phyllotaxy. You might remember from the first lecture that I use pink. and I gotta move this whole thing here, but right? So we had biological taxonomy, right? The very first class, which was like a classification system for biological things. And I think it was last class that I said phyll refers to a leaf. So this is basically the classification for how leaves are, or leaf arrangements. Leaf arrangements is fine for you to say. So different species of plants have different leaf arrangements. And you might be saying to yourself right now, why is Rebecca telling me about simple versus compound leaves? Why do I need to know palmately compound, pinnately compound? Why do I need to know what leaf arrangement a plant has? That seems like knowledge I cannot use. Wrong. It is knowledge you can use. Next time you're walking around and you see a plant that you would like to, or you go to a place and you see a plant and you say, oh, I want to know what that plant is. I'd like to plant that in my garden, or I'd like to buy one for my house, or that has fruit on it. I wonder, can I eat that fruit, or something like that? What are you going to Google? You're going to Google green plant name, right? No, that won't work. So you need to know these certain things. If you could tell, if you could go up to the plant and say, oh, this plant has compound leaves, and these leaves are pinnately compound, 1 times pinnately compound. And if you could describe the leaf arrangement on top of that, then your Google search can be a lot more efficient, and you might actually learn what the name of the plant is that you're looking for. So that's why it's helpful. All right, I digress, in case you were mad about learning this. All right, different leaf arrangements. First is opposite. Opposite leaf arrangements means that the leaves occur opposite from one another like this. So opposite each other on the stem. If you wanted to draw it, you can draw it like this. Here's a stem, leaf, 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 opposite one another, right? Okay, that's one type of leaf arrangement. Here is an example of that. You have a flowering dogwood on top and then a maple on the bottom. Let's go with white, right? So here, look, there's 2 leaves right here that are opposite each other, opposite each other. What kind of leaf is this? What kind of leaf is that? I can wait.
Pinnata, the single one. Pinnata.
So it's a simple leaf, right? Simple leaf. There's only one thing above the stem.
Yes.
So we say a simple leaf. Yep, simple leaf. How about this one? Is tricky down here. How about this one? Simple or compound?
Complex. Compound.
Yeah, so this one you could actually get into arguments about. This is one you could fight your friends, your plant-loving friends. So it is technically compound, and it's palmately compound. Yeah, see, Asmar, everyone else saying compound, and Asmar is saying I was going to say simple. Yeah, this is like a fighting. This is one you could fight over. So this is a compound leaf. This here is that it's actually a palmately compound leaf. So it has a central area where all the leaflets come out of. However, because this specific type of maple has been very cultivated and bred by humans, those individual leaflets have now fused together over time. But the correct answer is compound, but this one is a tricky one. So if you thought simple, that is fair, but it's technically, I know that, sorry, getting distracted here. Okay, that was opposite, but oh, that was the point. Duh. Look, regardless of what you want to say, if it's simple or compound, look, they're opposite each other, right? Opposite each other on the stem. All right, so that's opposite. Next, you have alternate. Alternate, if you were to draw it, looks like this. Here's the stem, leaf coming out, leaf coming out, leaf coming out. The leaves alternate side to side on the stem. They are not opposite. Stem, leaf, little longer stem, leaf, alternate. And here are some examples of that. And I'll ask again, kind of leaf is this, simple or compound? Simple or compound leaf?
Simple.
Simple. Most people are saying simple. Simple. Yes, it is. This is simple. Good. And notice that it, right? Notice how it alternates. Here's one leaf here, and then you got some stem, and then another leaf here, and then some stem, and then another leaf here. So it alternates, right? It's okay, Crystal. Crystal wrote, oops, and it's like, that's okay. That's why we're doing this, to learn. All right, how about this? I'm circling one leaf. Is this a simple leaf or a compound leaf? It's sideways. Everyone's writing.
Compound.
Yeah, compound. And then next question could be, how many times pinnately compound is this? So if you go up the stem, here's one thing. Can that thing be divided into other things? Yes. So is it 1 times pinnately compound, 2 times pinnately compound, or 3 times pinnately compound for this one on the bottom?
1 time.
2 times, yes, 2 times. So just to make that clear here. Sorry, Gemma, I like making that noise. So look, here's the whole leaf, right? And look, so this is one division of that leaf, but that division can be further divided into these little guys, right? So, whoops. Oh gosh, get out of here, drawings. So 1 times pinnately compound, 2 times pinnately compound, like this. I'll get it like this. 2 times pinnately compound. Okay. So opposite, alternate, right? Notice even with these compound leaves at the bottom, right? Here's a compound leaf. Notice the other one is not opposite of it. It's all, they alternate, right? They alternate. All right. Now, so you have opposite is one, alternate is another type of leaf arrangement. And then lastly here, I think this is the last one we cover today of arrangements, is this thing called world. World is kind of like, not the world, not like where you and I live. No, world, like whirled around in a spiral. So it's hard to see in this drawing, but basically these leaves are all originating from the same point, but into different directions around the stem. So you could even think of it as like north, like south, that's supposed to be an S, west and east kind of idea. But they whirl around the stem in the same point, just facing different directions 3-dimensionally. Examples of this, a lot of times in the mint family, you get whorled leaves. Sometimes you can have 2 leaves there, which might look opposite, but then the next one will be a different orientation. So it would be like that. I don't know why I'm making that sound, but it somehow helps me. Whorled can be a little tricky to identify, especially in the wild, because depending on where you look on the plant, it might appear opposite. But like here, all of these leaves are originating out of a central location around the stem. All right. Whew. So leaves can be different shapes, leaves can be different sizes, leaves do photosynthesis, leaves do transpiration, leaves can be simple, leaves can be compound. The compound leaves can be described in different ways. And they, whether you're a simple leaf or a compound leaf, you could be arranged in different ways on the stem, like opposite or alternate or whorled. Now let's talk a little bit about veins again. And this is going to answer a question that was asked at the top of the class, I think by Morgan, I can't remember now, but about dicot versus monocot. So first we should just point out a couple things here. So there's two basic types of venation. Yeah, Morgan's like waiting for it. I thought it was Morgan. There's two basic types of venation that we have to know. And when I say venation, venation just means the pattern of leaves, the pattern of veins of the leaf. So one type is what is called netted. There's a more fancy term for that, but for now, netted is fine. And the other one is parallel. For example, in this lily of the valley. So I'll do the parallel first because that may make netted more clear. So look, parallel venation means all the veins run parallel to each other. So for example, if I put my fingers like this, right? My fingers are running parallel each other because they're going whoop, 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 whoop. Oh, what is that? I need lotion. So parallel venation, right? Running right along next to each other. Whereas netted venation is basically not parallel. So depending on the leaf, netted venation might look like, I got to move this box here. You guys can't see it on my end, but I got a bunch of boxes here to manage. Netted venation could look like this, where you have a mid-rib and then veins coming off the mid-rib. Or netted could look something like this, where you have, in our maple example, a bunch of veins and then maybe littler veins connecting between the other veins. The point is, netted is not parallel. And we'll look at some more examples here before we, here, this is in real life, not a drawing. The leaf on the left has netted venation. Right? There's a vein, there's a vein, there's a vein, veins coming in between the two, etc. The leaf on the right, which is from a grass, has parallel venation. So the veins run parallel each other, etc. So usually, and this goes back to Morgan's question, usually dicots have the net-like or reticulate venation. So that was I was saying back here that for netted, you could have a more fancy word, which is this word, reticulate. Reticulate just means netted or net-like. So dicots usually have net-like patterns of venation. And there's just some examples here on this slide. Whereas monocots usually have parallel venation. And so visually, that's one way to tell dicots and monocots apart without even needing tools like a microscope or anything like that. In addition, as I was saying before, if you come across a plant and you want to figure out what it is, well, now I'm giving you tools to be able to tell whether it has a simple leaf or a compound leaf. And if it does have a compound leaf, how you would describe that compound leaf. I've given you the tools to describe the way that the leaves emerge off the stem, whether it's opposite or alternate. But also now I'm giving you the ability to tell whether it's a monocot or a dicot. So you could Google something like, all right, dicot plant with simple opposite leaves instead of green plant that, right? So dicots usually have the net-like, monocots usually have parallel. Here is a picture of a leaf. Is this leaf from a dicot or a monocot?
Dicot,
Why do you say dicot?
because it's parallel.
Right, well, so monocots usually have parallel venation. Dicots usually have a net-like venation. So if this one is parallel, it has to be from monocot. Yes, and people are writing that. Stephanie Crystal are writing that in the chat box. Thank you. Yes, so parallel venation usually means you're talking about a monocot. Now, how about this one? What about these veins of this leaf? We think this is dicot or monocot, right? Neil, Stephanie, Crystal over there
That's
writing.
the opposite, so it would be the dicot, right?
Exact. Well, so this is net-like, right? Net-like. This is not parallel.
Right, that's what I meant, not parallel, because it's not going up and down.
Exactly, right? So if we now we know if it's net-like, which is basically not parallel, right? You're talking dicot. So here we see parallel, so we know this must be a monocot, but here we don't see parallel. We see net-like. So we know this must be from a dicot. Okay, good. Good. All right. Now we're going to talk, so that was a lot of stuff that you can see with your naked eye. Now we're going to talk about parts of the leaf inside the leaf. Inside the leaf. All right, so whoa, okay, wow, it's got super sciencey, right? It's all fun and games, and we're just talking about leaves and maybe like veins, but then boom, whammo, here you go, real science now. So this is, don't be nervous. We'll walk through this. Let me see what I got here. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to walk you through this diagram. This is a cross section through a leaf. Look here, I'll get you oriented. Look, here's a leaf. This is a simple leaf down here, right? There's our good friend petiole, which is the stem of the leaf. And then there's this whole part here, which is that flat part, which is the blade or the lamina. So look, see where they made the incision right here? See the little cut? So now we took a little piece of leaf and we put it under the microscope and we see the cellular components. So last time when we were learning about tissues, I mentioned, so we'll come across some of them today. But I mentioned to you, remember I was showing you the leaf and I said, you know, leaf has epidermis, just like we have epidermis. And if you're a leaf, you have a top part and a bottom part. And so there's going to be epidermis on both sides of that leaf. So that's a good place to start here, is to look at the epidermis first. So for epidermis, I will use red. All right, so look here, upper epidermal cell. So this right here is one cell of the upper epidermis, and that's this whole layer here is the upper epidermis of the leaf. The bottom of the leaf, you have lower epidermis, which I'm also doing in red. And so these are all cell layers. I think I got something in the chat, yes. Right, Sharana saying, I was thinking they look like epidermal layer of skin. They do, and in particular it does in this drawing, because on top of the epidermis, you have a cuticle, which in this drawing is shaded in red and kind of gives it like a skin-like coloring, almost like a reddish skin here. But so you see, like, so yeah, it does. Oh no, redo that, redo. Oh no, yeah, okay, good. But I want to undo just those there. Yeah. So in red here, in the red that I drew, is the epidermis, the upper epidermis and the lower epidermis. Both of those are covered with a cuticle, right? Cuticle on the upper epidermis, cuticle on the lower epidermis, on the outside. And we'll talk about the cuticle on the next slide, but the cuticle serves the same function the cuticle serves for you and me, because we have a cuticle on our skin too, and it's just to prevent the skin from drying out and to protect it from things entering the skin too. So serves and to keep moisture in. So same difference, serves the same purpose. Next, so we'll work from the upper epidermis down for simplicity. So next you have this inner layer of the leaf between the epidermis, and I'm just going to highlight the whole thing first. And that whole area is called a mesophyll. You might remember from last time I said mesophyll means middle of leaf. Meso means middle, phyll means leaf, mesophyll. So the whole area between the epidermal layers is the mesophyll, but the mesophyll consists of different parts. So the top part, which I'm drawing in blue, is what's called the Palisade Mesophyll. One way I like to remember it is because, like, you know the Palisade Parkway, you know the Palisades, like those really tall rocks right across the George Washington Bridge. It kind of looks like that, right? Kind of looks like those big tall rocks. So Palisade Mesophyll at the top. Under the Palisade Mesophyll, and I'll do this in pink, is a looser layer of mesophyll cells, which is called a spongy mesophyll cells. So epidermis, and then the mesophyll. Top part of the mesophyll is the Palisade Mesophyll. The looser, less organized bottom part of the mesophyll is called spongy mesophyll. And then I will use black. Obviously, inside of the leaf, we just learned about it, there are veins. There are veins. So here we see one vein, kind of like the end of a vein, right? Like a straw, like the top of a straw. Here, this is showing you like the inside of the vein with the end being here, right? But it got kind of like cut off. And inside, so you see here, vascular bundle or vein, that's what I drew in black. And inside of that vascular bundle or vein is going to be vascular tissue, xylem. So vascular tissue, AKA xylem and phloem. In this drawing, I'll do xylem is here and where I'm putting orange. And in this drawing, I'll use light blue. Phloem is on the bottom. You might say to me, how do you know which one is xylem and which one is phloem? The xylem is always way bigger. So like these larger tube looking shapes, right? In this vein, they're like this part here. Okay, I'm just getting you oriented. And then lastly, so you have upper epidermis, lower epidermis, the mesophyll, which has the Palisade Mesophyll at the top and spongy mesophyll at the bottom. And then veins, which have the vascular tissue inside. And then the last thing I want to point out, and I will use, I'm running out of colors here, I'll use yellow, is these structures here, oops, which is the guard cell and the stoma, which we'll talk about on a subsequent slide. But you see this word stoma? Stoma means a hole. And this is where, this hole at the bottom of the leaf is where the water vapor, remember we learned about transpiration right at the beginning of the class today? About water vapor leaving the leaves. The water vapor is going to leave the leaves through these little holes. Look, here's another one here. Water vapor can leave through those little holes. You need to have those holes for the water vapor to leave, because if not, this cuticle, the cuticle that covers the epidermis down here, so cuticle I have in black, there's a cuticle down here. It's not going to let water leave. So you need the holes of these special structures, which we'll talk about on slides coming up. All right. Now you know the internal parts, at least the names of them. We can look at what they do a little bit more specifically, and that'll probably help you remember them better. So here's that cuticle I mentioned. Cuticle is going to be on both the top of the leaf and the bottom of the leaf. And basically it's a waxy layer that prevents water loss, just like the cuticle that you and I have on our skin, right? All right, now let's see where I go. Yeah, so some of the players that we just talked about on this slide, well, no, I should say, what are the two functions of the leaf that we talked about? Photosynthesis and transpiration. So if those are processes that occur inside of this leaf, that means that the tissues inside of the leaf are going to be involved in those processes, for those processes to occur, right? That makes sense. For example, like if you wanted to talk about, in humans, like urination or something, that involves the kidneys. The kidneys are going to be where processes are occurring for that to occur, right? So if photosynthesis and transpiration are occurring in the leaf, the tissues of the leaf have to be who's doing that, right? So start with transpiration. Remember at the top of the class that I said, I'll use black, right? Water goes into the roots, moves up the vascular system of the stem, water enters the leaves, and then eventually water will be used in photosynthesis, but it will also be released out of these holes on the bottom of the leaf. And when that water vapor is released, we call that transpiration. So you might see this term here, stomata, stomata open. And that is what this structure is, basically, is a structure that has an opening. We could call that structure a stomata. Stomata for this class is fine. There's other ways to describe it. So this is a real life microscope slide. It's a scanning electron microscope slide of the bottom of a leaf. And it's actually showing you the lower epidermis. So I'll use red. So like here, this is one epidermal cell. Notice it's kind of shiny because it has that cuticle. Yeah, it's cool, right? It's super cool. It's Zikia, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Just making sure I want to say your name correctly. Yeah, always correct me if I say anyone's name wrong, please. All right, so see, look, epidermal cells, and we're looking at the bottom. Notice it says lower epidermis. And this is where you're going to find those openings that are involved in transpiration. See, so here is one of them. Here's one. And each of these things is, it says here stomatal apparatus, but stomata is fine. You can just call it stomata for this class. That's fine. But basically one of those, so I circled one of them, right? One stomata, and each stomata has two parts. It has guard cells, which I'll do here in orange. Here's one guard cell. Here's the other guard cell. And then, so two guard cells, two guard cells. And then every stomatal apparatus or stomata has an opening, which I'll do, I guess, in bright blue, in the middle. And that opening is called a stoma. And so the guard cells are basically going to be able to open and close that hole. And if they open the hole, that allows water vapor to go out during transpiration. And then when they close that hole, that makes water vapor stay inside the leaf. I got a thing here. Any correlation between the fuzzy stuff on plants and on peaches? Yes, those are trichomes on the skin of the peach. But those trichomes don't have any stingy things in them, so we can eat it. All right, this is a real life scanning electron microscope slide. Let's look at a drawing of the same thing. So this is what I just drew on the previous slide, but this would be a little easier to probably see. Here's a guard cell. Here's another guard cell. And in the center there is the hole, right, called the stoma. See, stoma. And this is where water vapor, when the stoma is open, is just going to be able to leave out of the leaf. Okay. All right, so that's basically what's going on in the epidermis, right? You have epidermal cells with a cuticle on both the top and bottom, and on the bottom you have these things called stomata that regulate water vapor loss. And then on the inside of the leaf is that mesophyll. Remember I said everything between the upper and lower epidermis is the mesophyll, or middle of leaf. And the mesophyll layer is what's going to perform the process of photosynthesis. So I think, I guess I got to show you real quick here. Okay. Here's the mesophyll layer of this is a leaf cross section. Here's the mesophyll layer. Notice the upper and lower epidermis. Notice the stomata on the lower epidermis. Inside of that mesophyll, remember, top layer is the palisade, bottom layer, which is less organized, is the spongy. But in that, so in this mesophyll are these green cells. And those green cells, see here? See all these green things? Those are all green cells. And those green cells are called chloroplasts. So here is a mesophyll cell. Sorry, I should back up. Mesophyll cells. So this is like, for example, the palisade mesophyll cells. This is the spongy mesophyll cells. Inside of the mesophyll cells are chloroplasts. So this is actually trying to show you these little dots inside of these mesophyll cells. Here's one mesophyll cell. Notice all the little tiny green dots inside. Each of those tiny green dots inside is something called a chloroplast. Chloroplast. Here's a giant chloroplast. One of those blobs blown up, right? So we can see inside. And inside of that chloroplast are these different things. We will discuss these different things in more detail during the physiology lecture. But today, just know that the mesophyll layer is where photosynthesis occurs. Those green dots that look like bumps, correct? Yeah, so like, yeah, the chloroplast. So this is one mesophyll cell, but inside you see these like little blobs or bumps. Those are each chloroplasts. And then this is one chloroplast that's gotten bigger. Today, though, we won't talk about photosynthesis in detail. We'll just say that the mesophyll layer is where photosynthesis occurs. Okay, because we'll talk about that more. So what is chlorophyll? Chlorophyll is a pigment found inside of chloroplasts. We'll talk about that during the physiology lab. Okay, so this was a drawing of the mesophyll. Here is a leaf, I can't talk. Leaf cross section. Here, let me get more tea. More tea, please. That's better. Okay, this was a drawing. This was a drawing. This is a real microscope slide. So sometimes you can look at the leaf anatomy, like meaning you could look at a leaf underneath the microscope and tell whether or not that plant was getting a lot of sun or not. So look up here, leaf anatomy, sun exposure versus shade, right? And in order to make this slide, we have to stain the leaf tissues. And just so you know, the green chloroplasts, when you stain them to make a slide, they turn red. That's why, so they would normally be green, but you have to use a stain. But look, this leaf was grown in full sun. So like, look at how much mesophyll tissue there is, right? Look how much mesophyll tissue there is. As versus this. This is a leaf from that same species, but this leaf was in the shade. So look at how very little mesophyll tissue there is, right? And that's because mesophyll is where the process of photosynthesis is going to occur. So if you're in the shade, you can't get that much sun. And so it's a waste for the leaf to have a bunch of mesophyll tissue because it's not going to be able to do photosynthesis anyways. So that's why this would occur. And there was a class, might have been last class, where somebody was asking me why the lower leaves were dying as we watched the sunflower grow. Well, this is why, because if the leaf can't do its main functions, then the plant will just get rid of it. Okay. So mesophyll is where photosynthesis occurs. If the leaf is grown in the sun, lots of mesophyll tissue. Leaf was in the shade, not so many. This is a reminder of what things go into photosynthesis versus what things come out. We will talk about photosynthesis in way more detail in the physiology lecture. Yeah. Oh, one thing I should mention though, and actually that's funny that who was it? Asmar was asking, what is chlorophyll? It's interesting that you asked that because I do have a slide about that here. So yes, so we'll learn about chlorophyll in more detail later, but basically there is a green pigment that is inside of the chloroplast, and that green pigment is called chlorophyll. But chlorophyll is not the only pigment inside of leaves. Leaves actually contain a lot of different pigments, and you can do things in the lab like smush up a leaf using a mortar and pestle and then adding different alcohol and things like that, and then titrating that out. And you could actually see, and I did this long ago when I was TAing a plant physiology class. But look, so you would have a green leaf, but then if you process it like this, you can see all the different pigments that are involved, that were inside of that leaf. But notice these two here, chlorophyll A, chlorophyll B, are green. Those are the pigments involved in photosynthesis. Okay, that's why I have that there. Oh, why I mentioned that is because at the top of class, I was like, oh yeah, fall, right? Beautiful leaves in fall. Well, these are the different pigments that are responsible for that beautiful display in the fall of different colors. So certain plants, in the fall, the first pigment that goes away is this chlorophyll A and B. So that's the first thing that will degrade in fall. And then all these other colors, all these other pigments, beta carotene, different types of xanthophylls will be more apparent. And that's why leaves start to look like this in the fall. All right. Yep. So this is just to show you some examples of, you don't need to know the different names of these different chemicals. I'm just showing you how there's variation in the fall colors. I think I've already covered this today, but yeah, veins, they're made up of those conducting tissues, xylem and phloem, and just a recall that xylem transports water from the roots to the leaves. Phloem transports sugar from the leaves to the rest of the plant. And I think this is the last, yeah, good, okay. We're almost done, and the roots won't take near as long. The roots will go through a lot quicker. Remember I said, I'm not going to scroll all the way back, but remember when I said that monocot plants have leaves that are parallel, have veins that are parallel to each other in the monocots, and that dicots have veins that are not parallel. They are net-like or reticulate. You can see that with your naked eye, but you can also see that under the microscope. So on the right here is a microscope of a monocot. And because the veins of the monocot are parallel to each other, if you were to cut a leaf and look at the leaf under the microscope, all of the veins would face you because they run parallel to each other. And that's what you see here on the right. Notice these red circles are each showing you a vein, and each vein faces you because the monocot veins run parallel, so you can see all of them. Whereas on the left-hand side here, this is from a dicot plant, and dicot, because they don't run parallel, you're not going to be able to see all the veins so clearly. So if this is what a monocot looks like, this is what a dicot looks like, to be net-like. And if you were to do a cross-section and do a microscope slide, Yeah, okay, like this finger might be pointing, or this finger might be pointing directly at you from the microscope, but these other ones you're seeing kind of like the sides of it, right? Because they're not parallel, they're net-like. And that's what you're seeing on the right here. The purple circle shows you one vein that is facing you, whereas the purple rectangle is showing you kind of like the side of another vein. Okay. Over evolutionary time, there's been some plants that have adapted different types of variation, which allow the plants to have different adaptations to environments. So for example, succulent leaves, which are a common houseplant people like to buy. Those have adapted to store water. And you have spines. The last time I showed you in the stems. Hold on. I'm dropping my water here. Last time I showed you during the stems that that this here is a stem. And I think I might have brushed over it last time, and I think I might have just mentioned spines in reference to stem. But honestly, though, these are actually leaves. Spines are actually leaves, not stem. In this cactus, the fleshy part is the stem. Spines serve as protection. Yeah, see, Crystal has 2 succulents, see? Yeah, so the spines of a cactus are actually the leaves. They've become modified like that as they have survived in the desert for a long time. So spines serve for protection. Bulbs are for food storage. We also talked about bulbs last time for the stem lab, because I remember I told you that like at the onion, this part is the stem, but all the other part is leaves. Same thing over here with this garlic. The little thing at the bottom is the stem. All these fleshy things are leaves. Bulbs allow the plant to store food during the winter.
Professor, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So the rings on the onion, those are leaves?
Yeah. So these things here, all of these things here, that's leaves.
So that will be a monocot, right?
Well, so you can't really, so it's a little hard to tell from this because you can't really see the veins of these leaves because they're smushed together too much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And there's something called Brax. So these are all examples of modified leaves, guys, right? Modified leaves. So if I showed you this flower, right? Or even this flower, you would probably think that this white part here or this red part here is the petal of that flower, right? You're wrong. No, so these are actually modified leaves that are called bracts. So this white thing here is actually a leaf. This black thing here is actually a leaf. This red thing here is actually a leaf. And in fact, the actual flower is only here. The flower for this one is here, and the flower for this one is here. And so if they didn't have those showy bracts, those fancy leaves, they wouldn't be able to attract pollinators as well, as good, right? Those bracts help with pollinator attraction. So that's what bracts do. Oh, and if you ever buy poinsettias around the holidays, the red part of the poinsettia you see here down here, right? You ever see these around the holidays, the winter holidays? This is the red part. These are bracts as well. They're called bracts. Leaf propagules. So some plants are able to make baby plants from their leaves. And so that's the case here. This is one baby plant. Next to that's another baby plant. This is one leaf with a bunch of pink baby plants on it. This has nothing to do with sexual reproduction. This is called vegetative reproduction just means that the plant's basically cloning itself. Yeah. Basically cloning itself. How would you know the difference between flowers with bracts and flowers with petals? We don't have time to go into it today, but we'll learn more about flowers. And when we cover the flowers, I can show you structures that exist on the flowers that allow us to tell whether those are bracts. But the other thing is when we get to the flowers, I can explain it a little bit better. Yeah, it's a little complicated to go into today. Yeah, so leaf propagules via cloning, and then aquatic leaves that allow plants to live in water. Okay, what's the name of the plant with the pink leaves? Are you talking about this one here? Are you talking about this one here, Asma? Okay, so believe it or not, this plant and this plant are actually the same plant. They're just different varieties. And so there's different names for this plant depending on where you are. One name for it is Mother of 1,000 Devils. Another name I've heard for it is Madre de Mil Pendejos. That's the other one I've heard. I don't know what its real scientific name is. But yeah, it is a fun plant to have because you can give your friends like babies. So like these little things fall off, you put them in dirt and you can give them to your friends. So that's fun. Yeah, see, if you search that, then the plant comes up. Yeah, all right. Aquatic leaves that allow plants to live in water. And this we won't get into great detail, but you got to think about it like this, right? If a plant's living in water, the leaves might be submerged under the water, or the leaves might be floating on the water. Either way, think of something like those openings I was mentioning before. You're going to have different things about your leaves if your leaves are living in water, hence that variation. Another one is like lily pads, exactly. Another one is these, maybe some of you have heard of like a Venus flytrap or a sundew. So that's what's shown at the bottom here. This is one that's called, I'll do a different color. I'll do pink. So Venus flytrap, you guys are probably most familiar with in terms of a carnivorous plant. There's also this called a sundew. Sundew kind of looks like dew. And then there's different types of pitcher plants. This on the top is a pitcher plant. This is another type of pitcher plant. All of these have evolved to capture insects because they live in places where they don't get enough nitrogen. And so the dead insects that it eats will actually serve as, serve as nitrogen for the plants. Okay, I think that's all the adaptations. Oh yeah, this is quick. Important of leaves and human diet. So believe it or not, you probably eat leaves every day. These are just some examples. This is not an exhaustive list of examples here, but arugula, mustard greens, collard greens, dandelion greens, broccoli greens, romaine, kale, Swiss chard, kohlrabi. All of those are examples of leaves that you eat. Bok choy, cabbage. You also use leaves, remember herbs, as seasoning. So oregano, garlic, fennel, chives, thyme, stevia, basil, sage, etc. Right? Dill. If you ever drink tea, like I am tonight, or have ever drank wheatgrass, those are drinks that come from leaves. Okay, see how we got here. Roots. I think roots we can get through a lot faster. Yeah. All right. So most of today is about leaves. We will talk about roots a little bit, but we won't have to go as slow for parts of it because we already went through it today. So this is that same schematic, the root system is what is usually below the ground, right? What do roots do? Well, we learned already last class that roots anchor the plant to the soil, or they anchor the plant to whatever it's growing on, like a rock or another plant, depending on the species. Believe it or not, the majority, so if you're a plant whose roots grow in the dirt, usually only about 1/3, this does not apply to your house plants and pots, okay? But in nature, usually when you see a plant growing in the ground, usually you're only seeing about 1/3 of the plant. So the next time you're walking around and you see a really big tree, I want you to keep in mind, you're probably only seeing 1/3 of that entire plant because 2/3 of it are underground. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. What do roots do? So they anchor the plant to the ground. They absorb water and minerals, right? And when water and minerals move up through the plant, so I'll show you what this is trying to show you. I'll use pink. So as water moves up through the plant, actually I'll go to the side here. We'll use blue for water. Come on, Rebecca. As water moves up through the plant, it actually helps sugars move down through the plant. It's like the liquid movement of water kind of helps push sugars to where they need to go. So that's what it means when it says plays a role in conducting materials throughout the plant. This is it in like really simple little kid drawing. This is it in like grown-up person scientist drawing. You don't need to know the details of this, but just suffice it to say that as water moves up through the plant, it helps sugars move to other parts of the plant. That's enough to know about that. You don't need to know this thing. Another thing roots do is they store food in the form of sugars. So just like I was saying, you don't need to know the details of this, but it's a good place for me to draw on to get this point across. So remember that phloem transports sugars from the leaves where photosynthesis occurred to the roots and rest of the plant. And in some plants, so let's say the sugars get transported to the roots. In some plants, the sugars will get stored there. And that is what happens in the case of these type of roots, like a carrot or a sugar beet or a turnip. The reason we eat them and they're sweet is because the sugars the leaves made got stored in those roots. In addition, though, in the fall, so when the leaves fall off the tree in the fall, you might think to yourself, well, Rebecca, I thought that the leaves make the food. So if the leaves fall off, then how does the plant live in the winter time? Well, what happens is during now, like the summer and spring, sugars would have gone from the leaves to the roots, and the roots will store the sugars and use those sugars during the winter to keep the plant alive. That's for the trees. All right. So you know, this is showing you a baby plant emerging from a seed. So the first root that comes out of the seed, I'll use orange, is called a radicle. Not like radical, awesome, not like that. I'm dating myself. Yeah, radical. But eventually the radical will mature and be called the primary root eventually. Sorry, there you go, wake you up with a little nostalgia. See? And the radical will grow into the primary root. And then the secondary roots will eventually arise off of the primary root. Oh, and let's watch this video real quick. Stop share. And I already have it loaded. Yes, I do. And so go back to you guys. Share screen. Boom. So this is just to show you, you should be able to see the screen now of the YouTube. Come on. So hopefully you can see this. So look, so this is a kidney bean, and that thing that's coming out of it. Oops, I paused it. Look, what did I use before? Pink. Look, the radical, sorry. The radical is emerging from the seed. So this is a time lapse that occurs over 25 days. So look, so there's the, oh, I'll get rid of this. Look, the root is growing. The radical is now officially the primary root. Here come the secondary roots emerging off of the primary root. Secondary roots could also be called lateral roots. I'll pause real quick to just have you notice. Look, so the root system is there, but then this green thing here that's emerging, that's the beginning of the shoot system. So that's the beginning of the stem. Okay, day 6, day 7. Now the stem, so it's cool. This is cool because you can see the root growth continuing on the left. But now, wow, look at that stem. Oh, and I have a question. Look how long this stem has gotten. What type of growth are we watching right now in real time? Well, not real time, in time-elapse. Look how long. Look how long.
Secondary?
So we're watching the roots get long, and we're watching the stem get long in lengthening. So there's 2 types of growth. One is for lengthening and one is for widening. We're watching it lengthen right now. Thank you. Yes, primary growth. This is primary growth, right? Because everything is getting longer. Everything is getting longer. And look, just to point this out, to kind of hit this home, right? Look, here is apical bud at the tip of the shoot, but there'll also be apical buds at the tips of all these roots too, where primary growth can occur and get longer and longer and longer. Yes, okay. All right, so just keep this going for a second because it's almost done. But now we see like the shoot system getting longer and longer, primary growth occurring. We have the first set of mature leaves. Look at that apical bud go. Wow. Making new stem tissue, making new leaf tissue, right? Look at the root system on the left, how extensive it's gotten. Wow. So you guys can watch you guys can watch the rest of that at your leisure if you would like. I'm going to stop that there. And we'll finish this out because you'll have the access to that link. Hopefully you can see the PowerPoint slides again. There's 2, right. Watch plant grow, example of primary and secondary roots. Yes, that's what that is. If the primary root remains functional throughout the life of the plant, we call that root system a taproot system. For example, a carrot. A carrot would be an example of a taproot system. Another example of taproot system would be a dandelion. I don't know if you've ever tried to pull a dandelion out of the ground, but it's freaking hard. And the reason it's hard is because it has this really, really, really long taproot that goes deep, deep, deep down into the soil. So taproot system is one type of root system. If the primary root does not remain functional, you have roots arising from the base of the stem, you end up with what's called a fibrous root system. So here, there's no one primary root. There's no one. It's not like a carrot, right? Like there's not one primary root. There's just a lot of fibrous roots. So taproot system, fibrous root system. Right, this is like a type of question that I might show you on a homework or something like that, right? Different types of root systems. Okay. Root growth and region. So remember I said that there is an apical meristem located at the roots, just like there is in the shoots. So if we were to look, this is a plant here. And if we were to do close up at the tip of a root, that's what we're seeing here. And at the tip of that root, I'll use yellow. Nope, I guess I should use red because it's red here. Is the apical meristem, which is right here. And just like we saw in the stems, this apical meristem is still going to give rise to 3 primary meristems, and they're called the same things, right? Protoderm, ground meristem, and procambium, same primary meristems that we learned about in the stem lecture when we talked about the apical meristem. In addition to that, there's a little hat that protects the apical meristem in the roots. That's called a root cap. That's just because if the apical meristem were to get damaged, it wouldn't be able to make these 3 primary meristems and the root would die, right? So that's why it has this little root cap. What's nice about this slide is the 3 primary meristems, protoderm, ground meristem, and procambium. You see they have color coded them blue, yellow, and purple. What's nice about that is it shows you, look at that key on the left. So the protoderm is going to be making the dermal tissues, for example, epidermis. Ground meristem is going to make the ground tissues, which are shown here in yellow, cortex and pith. And the procambium, which is shown here in purple, is going to make, if you look at the key, vascular tissue, xylem, and phloem. So that's why I like this slide a lot. The apical meristem is, so there's different zones on a root, like different regions on a root. So the apical meristem is located in what's called the zone of cell division, and that makes sense because that is what's happening there. As the cells get bigger and bigger, so like as these different tissues grow, right? Like as the epidermis grows and as the cortex and pith grow and as the xylem and phloem grow, eventually those cells are going to get bigger and bigger, and that happens in the zone of elongation, which allows the root to get longer. And then lastly, you have this zone of maturation, which is where the cells are fully mature, and that's where we can call them the names that we have already been seeing, right? Like here shown in blue is the epidermis, right, which was made by the protoderm. Here shown in yellow is the cortex. We're not seeing a pith in this one, but the pith would also be yellow if that was there. Don't worry about this word steel. That's basically the vascular tissue. Don't worry about the word. Just know that there's xylem and phloem all through here in the vascular tissue, which was made by the procambium. Covered that last time, but same thing in the roots. This is just the same thing, but closer up so that when you're looking at your slides, you can see a little bit better. Root hairs, it mentioned root hair here for the first time. Root hair. Root hair is literally what it sounds like. It's like a little hair that grows off the sides of roots. And they're 1 epidermal cell thick. So for example, this is an epidermal cell, meaning like the cells that are at the edge, right? Sorry, I'll go back for a sec. I know you guys are losing steam, so am I. Look, right, where is the epidermis, right? The epidermis is the outside, right? Some epidermal cells will make root hairs. This whole thing is the epidermis, an epidermal layer. This epidermal cell didn't make a root hair. this epidermal cell didn't make a root hair, but this epidermal cell did make a root hair. So they're only one cell thick. That's how thin each of these hairs are. And that's super helpful because that allows the root hairs to get into like little crevices between soil particles or between like pavement and the soil. Like it can really kind of grow. It's so little and thin. It could really reach in between those little soil bits. And that allows the plant to access more soil and therefore get more water. They expand the surface area of the root. And water is absorbed by the root hair. So that's what I was trying to, with my little like dance a second ago. That's what I was trying to show you here. So like here is the epidermal layer of this root. Got to move this thing, right? Some epidermal cells did not make a root hair. Other epidermal cells did make a root hair. And the point is, see, water is absorbed by the root hairs. This epidermal cell, I'll use a different color. This epidermal cell can only has this surface here to absorb water. Whereas this epidermal cell here with the root hair has all of this area to absorb water. So that's why it says here, the root hairs expand the surface area of the root because it lets it get to more water. I think this is, we do this and then I think we have some root adaptations and then we're done. So just like we saw in the stems, dicots and monocots have different stems. Just like we saw in the leaves, dicots and monocots have different things going on with their leaves, right? For example, the monocots have parallel venation, dicots have the net-like venation. Well, dicot and monocot roots also have differences. In the dicot roots, the main difference is, and I'll use red. I gotta move all this. I can't even read what it says. Okay, yeah, dicots, vascular cylinder, centralized. So on the left, you have a dicot root. Here is the vascular cylinder. So that's just meaning xylem and phloem. That's where xylem and phloem is located in the dicot root. And it's hard to see, but I'll use black. The xylem is right here, the larger cell shape, and I'll use yellow here. The phloem is all around that. I think I have a slide coming up that shows it better. So dicot's vascular cylinder is centralized right here and kind of star-shaped. On the right, you have monocots. Monocots, it's also centralized, but it's much bigger. And each of these circles is a xylem with phloem surrounding it, kind of like this. It's hard. You'll see better on the next one. So you could say that the vascular cylinder is larger and that the components are arranged in a ring as versus centralized like that. Okay. I think I have, no, I don't. This is it close up. This is the dicot root with it centralized, right? Here it is. If you blow it up big, then you can see what I was trying to do before. Primary xylem is these larger cells. Primary phloem is all of these littler cells surrounding it. That's what I was trying to draw on the previous. I don't care about any of those things for you to know. But this is the same thing for the close-up of the monocot, right? Kind of in a ring, vascular cylinder in a ring. If you look here, primary xylem is the larger ones. And primary phloem is all the stuff around that stuff, right? Okay. And yay, this is the last part. Different types of variation that allow the plants to live in different places with the root. Okay. Adventitious roots are, or prop roots, are roots that allow the plant to have better support. So for example, on the left here, this is corn. So this is a corn stem. And off of that corn stem, these roots will come out. Remember I told you corn is a grass? So corn is a grass and it's not that strong. So these roots come out the side of the stem to help keep the plant upright. This on the right here is a type of tree that's using the same thing. So these things coming off are roots. Notice they're coming off of the stem in kind of a weird place. So that's why we call them adventitious roots. And if they come off the stem above the soil to support the plant, we call them prop roots. If any of you have ever seen mangroves before, mangroves have a type of prop root. Other times, if the roots come off the stem, it could be helping the plant to climb. So for example, ivy, the light went off, ivy growing off of sides of brick buildings, they're able to do that because of adventitious roots. So down here, this is a stem of ivy, and you can see all these like little hair-like roots coming off. Those allow the ivy to kind of dig into the brick so that it can grow up walls. And in nature, that would have been for it to grow up like the side of a mountain, like a rock, right? This we already talked about. Some roots have evolved for food storage. This is mangrove on the left and then orchid on the right. These are both examples of aerial roots. So roots that come off and are out in the air. In mangroves, these aerial roots serve as prop roots, just like we mentioned, but they also let the plant live in water environments. Roots need air. So if they're underwater, they wouldn't be as happy. So the aerial roots allow them to get air. And in these orchids on the left, or sorry, on the right, orchids don't grow in dirt. They actually usually grow on other plants. And so their roots are exposed to the air. And so aerial roots allow plants to live in the air or grow on other plants, meaning, live in aquatic environments or allow them to live on other plants. I'm fading fast. And then, the orchid roots, if you ever have seen an orchid plant, the roots are usually covered in a white waxy thing that is something called velamin that helps the orchid root not dry out. Then there is something called root nodules, which are most famous example is with pea plants, like a green pea. So these little kind of round things are root nodules. And what they do is they help the plant acquire nitrogen, because inside of those nodules will be bacteria that are able to take nitrogen from the air, which plants can't use. Plants can't grab nitrogen from the air. They have to use a different form of nitrogen. So the bacteria that live in the root nodules, they can take the nitrogen from the air and turn it into a type of nitrogen that plants can use. See, this is all happening down here in this little nodule. And so the plants are like, yay, thank you for that, for the nitrogen. Here's some sugar. And so the plants give the bacterium sugar in return. And these, I think this is these are the last ones. Aquatic roots allow plants to live in water. Some plants have relationships with fungus that allow So if you've ever seen like Avatar, how like all the trees are connected by this like unknown thing. Well, if you're a botanist, you're like, is it fungus though? It's probably fungus because this happens in real life, like a real life version of Avatar. Here's a little plant, pine seedling, with its little tiny roots like right here. And all this other stuff, all this other white stuff around it is fungus. And if there was another plant over here, little baby plant, they could actually share carbon via this fungal network. And this also allows plants to get more water as well. Don't worry about it. Look, this is what I was trying to show you. So here on the bottom, the green threads are showing you this mycorrhizal fungus. And then so it serves to connect the trees to each other, but it also lets the trees access more soil so they can access more water, kind of like root hairs. Yay! Definitely one of the longer ones today because we're covering 2 topics, but still not 9 whatever, right? So we finished today. I'm going to take a nap. No, so quiz 3 is going to be available now. It's due by Friday by midnight. I know this, you know, we cover a lot of material in each of these lectures is because the semester is only about a month long. So I know it's a lot. Let's see, next time we'll talk about flowers, fruits, and seeds. But one cool thing about next time that you'll probably be happy about is next time we are having a pre-recorded lecture. So you can pause and take breaks and things like that. Wednesday, we're also, so next week, Monday and Wednesday will both be pre-recorded lectures, which means we won't meet in the Zoom. A link will be provided on Canvas and you can click the link to watch the lecture. But make sure you'll still have a quiz from those lectures and you'll still need to participate in a discussion board. But just letting you know, it'll be nice to have a break because I know that these live ones can be really long. So with that, I don't have anything else. I wish you guys I won't see you again this week. So have a good rest of your week. Have a good weekend. For those of you in lab, have a good lab tomorrow. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Professor. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you guys too. I'll see you soon. Bye. Have a good night. Way to stay awake. Thank you. I'll talk to you later.